I'm here with Magnus Ditlev and Peter Christensen. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for
Fantastic.
having me and Peter.
Well, it's great. It's a real honor, and of course so the thing that drove me to I guess contact you guys was this incredible case study that you published, Peter, sole author, on Magnus, in this case study of this energy turnover and a case study. That's what. And then you went and mentioned, well, hey, why don't we get Magnus on at the same time? I'm like, of course, that's great. So this is really what's brought me to you guys. I know Magnus is down in the Canary Islands right now. That's where my athlete Andy Busher used to train as well. So I know exactly the area and the what you're kind of experiencing down there, Magnus. Hope you're enjoying the training with your national team. And Peter, you're coming to us from Denmark. Peter, why don't we start with you and give us your background. Apparently, we've actually met in a previous life, very briefly when I was at Team Denmark.
In some sense, I think. Well, the short version is I come from Copenhagen, Denmark. I had my master's degree at the University of Copenhagen at the August Krogh Institute with Jens Bangsbo, as some may be familiar of, as my supervisor, and continued along that line doing a PhD, also with Jens, and that was in collaboration with Team Denmark, being this, let's say, Olympic sport national organization, and from there on, I was lucky to get employed there full time and apply physiology to real athletes like Magnus, and that's something I'm very both proud of, but also happy and fortunate to work with the skilled athletes and coaches, and apply physiology in various ways. So that's a short one, and I think we. Back when you were here in Copenhagen, I think I was a student. But again, I mean, science is both a small and a big world, but there's usually a who's who thing going on. So good fun. And Jens is also still around. He hosted a conference some time ago. So still doing science. And I also try. With this case study, for instance, to still get involved with research every now and then when time is available and it suits everyone's needs.
Yeah, well, it's very unique what the two of you ultimately have produced here in this with this case study. It's very rare that that you'll get data from such an elite caliber athlete, and that the athlete even will be willing to to disseminate that knowledge, right? Coaches and athletes. So maybe we'll move to you next, Magnus. I really want to, I spoke to my wife on the way to her way to work this morning. I was driving her there, and she's like, "Well, what are you going to ask Magnus?" And I was like, "Well, I really want to know what his why is. Like, where did it all start for you, Magnus?" And start with there for us.
My triathlon why, or the reason why we posted this article. I think maybe they are even kind of in a way similar, because
I think exactly that. They are related. Like, something speaks to your drive, and I want to know where that kind of started from. As it must have started at a younger age.
Yeah, I mean, I was never a triathlete from a kid. Like, growing up, I wasn't even doing any of the three sports, so I was always very, very active though, playing soccer and badminton, and always practicing. And I remember when I was very young, playing in the garden, I made my own goal, and I just, even though it was like snowing or raining, or I was just practicing like kicking the ball and hitting the top corner or the bar all the time, so much that the grass in my parents' garden, at one point there was no grass anymore because I was just kicking the football and hitting, like the grass was completely done. So I think I've always been extremely active and also always had kind of drive to be better and see how far I can go and perfect things. So then I was coming into high school and I got in a class with two elite runners that kind of showed me where they were running in their athletic club, and I started running a little bit with them, and I started biking with my father in my spare time. And then it was, I think, more or less just because there is the local Ironman here in Denmark, the Ironman Copenhagen. It goes through my hometown, and we were spectating. It's quite a big event. We were spectating every year, and I thought the Ironman looked pretty crazy, but also, yeah, I wanted to try out, and now I could at least run a little bit from my running with my friends in the high school class, and also biking a little bit with my father. Swimming was always the the main issue or the weakness, as it still is today. But yeah, then I signed up for a half distance triathlon, and I remember walking even more than I ran on the half marathon, but something inside me, said it was fun. And then things kind of just took on from there. And in the beginning, it wasn't about, it was just my own little project. But I think as with the soccer and practicing in my parents' garden, I wanted more and I wanted to be better and better. And then I think a lot of this is also kind of meeting the right people, I guess. I was introduced to the local triathlon club here in Copenhagen, where my current coach, he was the head coach of that, or he is the head coach of that club, and I started training like under his guidance, and yeah, from there on things just skyrocketed, and pretty quickly I was like he is a former professional himself, so he kind of knew what level he had when he was competing as a pro, and he had been on Kona as a professional himself twice. So, and he saw my numbers, and pretty quickly we realized that I had the potential to become a professional. But back then I was also still studying to become a chemical engineer. And it's for a person like me, it's quite difficult to combine those two, because obviously I wanted to do my study well, but I also wanted to do triathlon, and I don't function really well if I don't do things 100%. So I kind of, after I finished my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, I decided to take a break and see if I could make it as a professional triathlete. And then, the thought was, if I don't have what it takes, then I can always start on a master's afterwards. But then, things just went crazy really fast. My progression, we saw improvements very fast, and then things took on from there.
Yeah. What a cool combination too, right? Because obviously you've got that gift that you didn't know you had, but you've discovered it. But not only that, like there's there is that passion that's within you that is seeking the next advantage, right? And that's kind of guiding you along, and that's probably brought you to Peter and Team Denmark, and your willingness to experiment and research and learn to see what's next. And that kind of goes right. I mean, doing some research on you, I went to your website, and like that almost speaks to your why in the website too, right? It's like you're not done yet, right? You've got these records, but it doesn't sound like you're finished.
No, not at all. I remember very clearly when I first was introduced to Peter. It was, I think, in 2021, going into Kona, which was my first Kona, and Jens, my coach, and I were seeking some advice regarding heat prep. And then, that was when we first started doing a project with Peter, where we did some, actually a little bit similar to this study. We in Team Denmark, they have a tent, like a climate tent, where we were able to simulate Kona conditions in there, and yeah, basically did something very, very similar to what we in the study did outside. We just did it in the climate tent in like simulated Kona conditions, and that was when Peter and I started working a little bit together, and then it was very project based, but now it's kind of a constant dialogue where we are pushing ideas back and forth, and yeah, very much in
Yeah.
communication.
Love it. Well, I think maybe we'll make like we're going to come back to the case study, and a lot of the case study really speaks to this new fourth dimension. Peter has kind of fed me this fourth dimension that we call durability, and also ultimately the fact that we all slow as we progress. So training science podcast. So let's talk a little bit about some science here today, and Peter. Thank you so much for mentioning Chris Abbas's and I's review, because it kind of all starts really with that, right? Which I was pleasantly surprised of kind of seeing when I read through that. And there's so many different aspects when we just look at that whole, what causes someone to fatigue in prolonged exercise. There's so many different factors, right? Magnus has just talked about heat, and then we've but then there's all these other ones too, right? Like there's substrate use, there's the oxygen uptake, there's neuromuscular, musculoskeletal fatigue aspects, there's the brain and motivation aspects. It's so complex. So where did you start, maybe, Peter, with this problem to try to help Magnus and research this?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I think just to start, the cool thing is that actually when there are so many variables, I mean, you can end in a lot of rabbit holes, but it's also nice because you can sort of try to prioritize, and there's a lot of things where you can actually make progress and hopefully, gain an advantage. Which is interesting, but also, of course, it sets some demands, and therefore, I mean, the paper you did, actually, I think it sums it up quite nicely. And I think back when I was a hopeful, aspiring student, I think the research group we were in was called Integrated Physiology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that speaks to itself. I mean, always acknowledging that this is an integrated response where you have a lot of things going on, but you need to have a feeling or understanding of the various components, how to measure them, what are the limitations and all that, and then try to integrate it into an athlete-specific scenario. In this context, being long-distance triathlon, but that could also be 2,000-meter rowing or track cycling as examples I also work with. But having said that, I think it's fair to say that as a physiologist, you have a lot of things to work with in triathlon, and that can, in some sense, maybe be a little nerve-wracking, but I actually enjoy it a lot. And coming back to all this, so we had to start some place. You need to start from a starting point, and we were just trying to address these various questions and curiosity. How big of a deal is fueling? How big of a deal is heat? How big of a deal is hydration, sweat rates, blah blah blah? And that's where we started, and we are here now. And it's been a good journey so far, I think.
Yeah, very cool. So let me kind of summarize what I sort of understand from the case study that was published in International Journal Sports Performance and Physiology. And ultimately, you're looking at, you're sort of doing a race simulation before Challenge Roth that Magnus sets the record in. And you're ultimately, you're doing these simulations, these, pieces of the race itself, swim, bike, run, roughly, I don't know, 30 days and 12 days before, something like that, right? And talk us through there, Peter, what you're kind of, what you guys were thinking, I guess, probably along with Jens and Magnus in all this. Again, very, very curious to how those conversations might have even sort of started. And talk us through the case study.
Yeah, I'll try to do my best, and please interrupt if I, go sideways or
Oh
backwards.
yeah, and
I tell,
Magnus too. Please interrupt as well. You are the
I,
subject.
yeah, exactly. But now I have a tendency to do that, so please keep me on track. But no, so I think coming back to, we have all these components that we believe are of importance for triathlon performance. I also tried to outline that in the figure, but we were actually a little unsure as to what does the substrate availability actually look like in Magnus, not in a subject from Australia or Canada or Denmark or whatever, in a study that was maybe not designed for triathlon, for something different. We had ideas based on good, strong science, but again, we know that it can be very case specific, and not all subjects are in the caliber like Magnus. Very few are actually. So we had some gray areas or whatever you want to call it, especially regarding the nutrition part. What does it actually look like, the metabolism, and this fourth dimension that you picked upon as to how. So one thing is we could measure stuff in the lab in a fresh setting, and we have some data also outlined in the paper from Magnus. But we also realized that that's just a brief picture. But most of the time when an athlete is competing, it's under influence from, I wouldn't say fatigue, but at least you're under influence from previous exercise performed. And therefore, we also wanted to see how does this running economy, how does the cycling economy change, or does it change at all? And from that, get ideas as to whether we should change something in let's say the race protocol, or we couldn't change anything in training because we were so close. So yeah, that was the background. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And what basically are you measuring, and what did you find? Like, where were talk us through what you measured, and the insights that you gained from this.
Yeah, having this, let's say, metabolic focus, and also knowing that Magnus was, doing his race routine with, carbohydrate fueling or loading, and we see that he starts off, in, I mean, I, people that know what 320 or 25 watts is on a bike, that you need to push something. But for Magnus, that's pretty moderate, but it's still in some aspects race specific. And so that's what was the race intensity for the bike part. But we had Magnus do swimming first off, because we wanted to have, the hormonal situation. So not just start on the bike fresh, but actually having this stress from the swim part, which is quite substantial. So not second guessing, but actually inducing that. And then we could see when he started up biking that he was, let's say, carbohydrate dominant based on the RER values. And we see that it slightly decreases despite the fact that there's a good amount of carbohydrates coming in also during the activity, where we try to do as in the competition a few weeks later. And we could see that, but he looked pretty stable, to say the least. I mean, the cycle economy was just rock solid, and there was only a drop in RER to around 0.9 when the bike leg finished, and then we stopped and made a second day with a second test day, having a more focus on the run part and not to do too much damage to Magnus. I mean, Magnus could maybe elaborate a little bit later on how he felt the testing days. But I was at least also a little busy and a little tired, and not complaining, because I think it was really good fun. And I could feel that we were onto something good here, and the data was solid. No technical errors, all that stuff that can happen with VO2 measurements going wrong or something like that. That was luckily not the case. But then we did the second day of testing, which was focusing on running. But we had then Magnus not eating a lot of carbohydrates in the day before, and then doing 2 hours of still solid fatiguing biking, and then close to 30 kilometers of running in close to race pace, where we then had treadmill tests around every, I think, 45 minutes to see what did the RER value look like, and the running economy. And we could see that we actually were quite good in having Magnus starting the second day where he finished the first day, and then we tracked the changes there, and again saw a gradual decrease in RER value, so not gaining, but having a higher reliance on fat as substrate for oxidation, but still we could see Magnus was quite solid and no huge decrease in running economy. So yeah, that was we got a lot of answers where we were a little uncertain.
Yep. Yeah, that's cool. For sure. I think, a lot of the data really shows around the durability aspect that you better have a good ability to oxidize fat throughout your exercise, right? At least as a foundation, and carbohydrates probably supplementing some more of the top end and whatnot. But Magnus, what did you get from this whole experience? Did you gain confidence? What was your experience through this?
Yeah, coming back to what the motivation for doing all this, I think Peter described it pretty good. But Jens and I are very curious people, and we kind of wanted to know, as Peter said, what is actually limiting me in this Ironman. We had some ideas, but we were really not certain, at least not how much possible different factors limit me. So for me, it is something I really enjoy doing, even though it's a super hard protocol, but it's something that actually, apart from the knowledge we gain, which is really, really nice, also gives me energy doing projects like that. It fills me with energy and inspiration. Working with people like Peter is something that motivates me a lot, and a big part of why I do triathlon is to kind of see what can we learn here, how can we do things better, and how can we always try to optimize things. So of course we wanted to learn a lot, and then stuff like this motivates me and gives me energy. I think some people might be the absolute opposite. They probably don't really like going to the laboratory and maybe prefers just doing their normal training, because it takes something out of the program to do things like this, because you have to at least do a small taper. We didn't taper too much, but you have to kind of restructure everything you do around test days like this. And I think personally many people are afraid of doing that, but for me it really gives me a lot of knowledge, and then, as you say, or as I say, motivation. And then at the end of the day, when I finish a test like that, and I know, after having done close to 40 kilometers at like running Ironman pace at 3:35 or something like that, it always also, as you say, gives me confidence. And I strive of being very well prepared. So when I am well prepared, I feel much better going into the race, and I always tend to perform better when I'm well prepared and have kind of know that I have done a solid job. So there are a lot of things that I feel like I'm getting out of it.
And just to add a little fun fact, and I think Jens Petersen Bach, the head coach, he needs acknowledgement for. I mean, he's also very curious, and having a mutual mindset, and he's sort of trying to integrate all these things. But he was actually part of that test day, but he was struggling a little bit in running. So I was all of a sudden I actually had to also make sure that there was hydration on the running course, because he was for Copenhagen standard it was actually quite hot, even though the weather data doesn't suggest it was that humid. But at the end of the day, he was having
I
a hard time.
think he managed 10.5 kilometers in my pace, and then he completely blew up. So
Yeah.
That's understandable. It's understandable. It's so interesting you mention, like, so when was that last 40K run at 3:35 pace done? Proximity to Roth?
I actually looked it up in the paper just before we spoke. I think it was 10 days before.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So it's so interesting because I think
10 days before. Yeah.
when Gustav Eden won Kona, he posted something on Strava, really almost kind of doing something similar. I mean, it was a couple 2 or 3 years back, and a lot
Mm.
of people just were almost kind of blown away by that. But just kind of to your point, the confidence that gives an athlete when they can do that, and it's I think Alistair's coach has said this before. It's like it's not the secret is being able to do that, right? So you've developed the durability to be able to handle that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It's a fine balance because obviously, if you yeah, if you can't do it in practice, then you cannot expect to suddenly turn up to a race and then do something like a miracle to happen. But obviously, you don't want to burn all your matches, so you have to be clever about it. But I think with the way triathlon is developing, how professional people are starting to act in all aspects of the high performance, I think you see that stuff like this is actually becoming more and more necessary. And yeah, for me, I don't feel like it takes anything out of my performance 10 days later, maybe even the opposite. Yeah.
Maybe, exactly. I was going to say that. And so we're working with a new algorithm that we call the workout reserve. I'd love to show you that to you guys more later because I think it can be really helpful. But ultimately, it captures windows of maximal mean powers. If you look at Quadidol 2010, that's kind of like the foundation of the maximal mean power concept, right? When you're always sort of looking at these windows of maximal mean power or maximal mean pace. The workout reserve is ultimately an algorithm that you can always kind of capture what's happened in the past, in the window of the last 6 weeks of data. And I can just imagine that your actual marathon performance in Roth, your workout reserve, your battery, let's kind of call it wouldn't have been fully depleted, or it would have been just perfectly depleted by the end. But to your point, if you haven't done it in the past, your workout reserve is going to be absolutely, way down in the floor. Your battery is going to be completely depleted as when you're trying to kind of do this miracle, Hail Mary, we would call it, type of effort. You've got to have done the work before, and workout reserve kind of shows that. And that really, this work is in review, but it's coming out shortly, and it really kind of explains. You can see it right in your training data, how your durability should actually perform. So, so you're giving all the evidence that you fundamentally do this in practice, but the workup is just it's an analytic tool you can actually kind of use for cycling or for running, and hopefully for other exercise modes as well. I want
we
to talk
look forward to see that publication. That's always interesting, but it always takes. I think it's this field is moving a lot, but I also think that being able to, again, coming back to integration, that data, you have all these data points, but also knowing the quality of data, and also never forget, let's say, the RPE within the athlete. That's also just important. But I hope that modern technology can make us progress in this, even though the most important thing is still having reflected athletes that are able to integrate these kind of things. And but that's not to say that these kind of things are not relevant. I just I hope that that point makes sense.
Yeah, totally. No, it's all about the integration. That's what you're doing. And this, the workout reserve is just one extra tool in the toolbox that you can use. But it's a very nice integrative reflection type measure that you can get. It's an external load marker only, external to you. Your internal load is going to be very personal, like you just mentioned, the RPE. You got to have that. You know, how did that actually feel, right? Relative. But you know, the external load is also, of course, it's what actually happens, right? So you want to keep a look on that too.
Sure. Just wanted to say that this, what I also think is hopefully inspiring, and saying this with the full respect that all athletes or coaches are different, but you know, having the willingness to do these kind of tests so close to, I mean, in all respect, Roth was an important competition, the second most important, I think it's fair to say, in the year, but not the most important, but still a highly prioritized competition. You know, doing these kind of things close to, some people shy away from it, but at the end of the day, you will know when competition comes. So, you know, why not get a feeling of it also, so you can at least make a better pacing plan according to your actual level, instead of, you know, just having this no guts, no glory, go in record pace, and then 19 out of 20 times you explode. I mean, maybe that's good for television, but I don't think it's good for you know, for athlete performance. And I just think that's very that's a very nice approach, which I really enjoy from Magnus and Jens's part, that we do these things close. Even though, I mean, you also, when you do that, you also need to, let's say, be open if results are not what you expect to be. I mean, you're digging in. You're digging a hole, and sometimes you like what you see and sometimes you don't, and that's always the thing, but you're gonna realize it anyway. So I think this is a very, very nice way to do it.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's, I'm just imagining, like, you've done these two simulations, right? And like pacing's almost dialed in for you. Would you say that, Magnus? I mean, you've kind of spoken to that, right? Like it brought you some confidence. You knew what you're going to do on that day.
Yeah, I mean, it helps tremendously to have done similar stuff in practice, and I think Peter points to a a good point, that the worst thing that happens is, okay, I failed this test session, but if I didn't do it there, then I would have done it in the race. So for me, it's also, we're using it a lot to kind of gauge my race pacing. And also, one of the test days was actually a quite warm day, as Peter said, for Denmark standards. So we utilized that to, like, then we kind of said, okay, then we might as well measure core temperatures as well, and did some like cooling strategies while we were doing all the other measurements. So we're just refining the very small details, that if you do it first time in the race, then the chances are that you will maybe encounter some problems, and that's nice to have done beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. You segue nicely to a pet interest of Martin, my co-host, and I's pet interest is the utilization of heat as a training tool. And you mentioned it right there, Magnus. Do you how do you think about heat as a adjunct kind of signal or whatnot that you try to get? Do you just kind of randomly get it in there? Is it purposeful? Is it a little bit of both? A little bit of art and science going there?
No, I think heat is probably the thing that Peter, Jens, and I have spent the most time discussing and also testing for different purposes and reasons. But it's no secret that I'm a big athlete for a triathlete standard. I'm around 80 kilos and producing very big power numbers as well. And when you do that, a lot of it goes to heat. So I think heat is probably one of the biggest limitations for me in racing, even in climate that many people might not think is kind of very warm, so heat is something that we pay a lot of attention to, and it was the first thing Peter and I started working with, and the reason for that was that I previously had been struggling in the heat, so we have really used a lot of time refining the heat protocols that we do going into warm races, for instance, and also the cooling strategies. I think people that watched Kona might have seen some of the cooling things we had going on. So it is something we are very, very, very aware of and try to measure as well as we can.
Mm-hmm. I recently had Brad Culp on the podcast who did the Norwegian method, and it was really interesting how he was. We spent a little bit of time talking about the preparation specifically for Christian actually in his Tokyo win, right, which was arguably the one of the hottest races there, and then to your point also, Magnus, the intensity of
Mm.
of that race, right, is even up kind of another level, right? So the heat production, the heat exposure in that is quite massive, right? And so knowing that, again, this is hearsay, is what they said. They really put the heat exposure on that almost with a huge intent. I can almost imagine where Christian was so motivated and passionate about getting this exposure. And to kind of go back into your chemistry or biochemistry ideas, there's the heat shock protein. Are you familiar with that, Magnus? I know Peter would be. But the heat shock protein is ultimately this protein that kind of, as I understand it, it sort of forms to tighten up kind of junctions around the cells and whatnot. It only is activated with actual temperature. So you got to get super hot ultimately to change your physiology there. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. I find that kind of, I'm reflecting again on Christian's win there, and the story about how he went to do that, and that's an interesting one. You ever thought of that? I'm not sure.
I haven't heard about the protein that you're mentioning, but Peter and I have been yeah, I think I mean it is the similar stuff we do, and it's not because there are 100 different ways to do heat training. So I think it is yeah, very similar, and the reasons I mean Christian is also, for his size, quite a compact guy that produces a lot of power, I imagine. So it makes totally sense that he in Tokyo had a huge focus on heat. I think the Norwegians were maybe the first people to really yeah, start researching that, at least for triathletes. I know it's been done a lot before, but the first triathletes that were really professional about it, and now people are starting to catch up and do similar things, if not more sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Any comments there, Peter, before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think heat is an interesting, factor, because you can have athletes that in, let's say, normal settings, then they lose a lot of positions, or you can go the other way around, that you have, let's say, people that usually are not close to top 10, and they can advance a lot by having, superior strategy. And I think the really nice thing is when everything comes together. And I mean, people working in elite sport know that not it doesn't happen that frequent as you might wish for. I mean, these peak performances where everything just clicks, the training, the pacing, the equipment, blah blah blah. But this factor with heat, I think it's a really nice one. But it's also one where you can, really make, bad choices in preparation and bad choices in racing. But I think it's an interesting factor, and there is a huge, let's say, performance reserve there if you can dial it in. But it's also a very delicate balance, and everyone working with it knows this. And also, at the end of the day, the athletes that are subjected to say, okay, should I follow this pace? Should I increase? But I can still see my heart rate is actually quite high, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, integrating all this while you're under huge stress, that's a huge impact. It's easy for me trying to come up with a plan, but it's much harder to, I would argue, execute, because everyone that has tried to be, let's say, hyperthermic, and we're not talking about 38.5, but even hotter, knows that something's happening up here also. So I think it's really interesting, but we can do a lot, and I think so far Magnus has proved that he's pretty solid in hot conditions, and that's really, that's just kudos to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, he certainly has proven that, right? You wouldn't predict someone that's 80 kilos, could do what Magnus can do. So it's remarkable to watch him in, the hot races like Kona. I think heat ultimately is it's almost like a different stressor over the exercise, right? It needs to be periodized and programmed in almost with a separate sort of thought, right? Like it's a different stress. And you can bin yourself if you're adding both a heavy exercise day and a heavy heat day. Well, that's combined stress, right? So you've got it's a delicate thing for both, Jens and Magnus to balance, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the thing is, the fortunate thing for me being, still involved and having colleagues around, say, both at the University of Copenhagen, but also other universities that, now bringing this fear of missing out part now with, let's say, sustained heat training, like I call it the poor man's altitude training, right? And you can sort of, okay, I need to do this, and it has to be 4 or 5 weeks, and it ideally has to be quite frequently, but you can also burn your matches too much there. But it's really interesting, and we have been on to this. I mean, as far as I recall, going back somewhere after Rio, all these studies also coming out of, at least part of them was coming out of Copenhagen with Lars Nypo as part of the group, and Carsten Lundby, and he also had a stint in Norway. So also not just seeing heat as let's say a bad cop, but it can actually also give you something if you utilize it in a right way. But because a scientific study or a few scientific studies shows that on average you can expect this and that, it's not always it works like that, and at an individual level, and you also need to balance that in, and I think that's quite interesting. But you can, but heat, it's just a tricky thing. But it's really, I enjoy working with it. That's the simple point.
Very cool. Back to your case study, one of the real focuses was around substrate use, fats versus carb. You're measuring RER. You were kind of hovering around 0.85, 0.9 throughout the day. Again, to summarize, as expected, endogenous fat oxidation goes up as the duration goes, right? Classic.
Mm-hmm.
How does, I don't know, what's your whole strategy for you as an individual, Magnus, around your own, nutrition? We talk a lot about, there's a lot of talk about this, 120 grams per hour, type philosophy. That's pretty rampant. Does that weave into your strategy? Did any of the, what's your whole philosophy around the nutrition stuff?
Yeah, I think do you want to answer, Peter? I can tell what we are doing in the races, but it is on the guidance of Jens and Peter. So I don't know who should start.
Yeah, well, I can say maybe you try to evolve, right, with your knowledge and know-how and so forth. But we're, on the bike, Magnus is pretty, intense on the carbohydrates, and and he has raised the game even higher compared to the Roth data you see here. And we also have some data which, we haven't shared. and I don't know whether we're gonna share it, but that's a different story. But just to say that, that's also the cool thing about these types of study. I mean, now we have, let's say, a footprint, but a pretty detailed physiologic footprint based on a given strategy, and on the in the case study, it was 140 grams an hour on the bike, and around little more than half of that in running. So that gives you an idea of the dynamics. But we are trying to, see how much we can push those boundaries. But of course, it's a focus to have. To have carbohydrates, but still also being able to utilize fat. So it's sort of like not being too much in. I mean, there's a spectrum. You can have people that are just, it's all about carbohydrates, and you can also have people that it's all about ketogenic diet and just using fat. And I think we are pretty much sort of, acknowledging both parts of the coin and try to make use of both parts of the coin. That was a political answer.
But that's not, I mean, performance matters at the end of the day, right? Performance needs to be your ultimate guide. And you need to be, paying attention to both. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. So very cool. Can I ask, are you using tracer tech to try to pinpoint the oxidation rates and whatnot of those substrates?
Yeah, we didn't have access to it in this particular study, and I think actually we could probably have incorporated. You never know, but we did that afterwards actually. So the Morten guys from Sweden, we did a small collaboration. There's also a little video on the social media platform of Team Denmark, I think, or was it on your platform? I can't recall, Magnus, but no secrets there. Because that's always nice to have that as an something we try to build upon. But again, I still think you can get pretty valuable knowledge without it. But it's nice to have. It's not a need to have. That's my personal opinion. But again, we were very happy that we were able to do this kind of test, and Morten wanted to collaborate, and it gave us some interesting insights for sure.
Magnus, do you feel like your performance, your power output kind of can rise when you are training your gut ultimately to handle more carbohydrate?
It's difficult because you don't do the race twice, so you never know. You come to the race with a shape, and then you apply the nutrition strategy, and the output is the output. So you don't get the chance to do it with like 40 grams more power, so whatever. But so it's hard to say but I feel that I have like energy throughout the entire Ironman, and I feel that I have the ability to push. Never really bunking or anything. And I think also where I notice the high carbohydrate intake really helps me a lot is during long training camps, where kind of training for like going into Kona. I was 6 weeks in altitude training, above 30 hours every week. And if you are going with low carbs in your sessions for such a long duration of a camp with such high volume, then I feel that I kind of burn out throughout the camp, and I feel with the higher carbohydrates in training, it really helps me sustain the quality throughout the entire camp. So that's really where I can notice it. In the races, it's difficult, but I feel I can handle it. So as long as I don't get the stomach issues and so on, and it's something I've practiced a lot, obviously, in training before, and kind of gradually build up to that amount of carbohydrates per hour. So yeah, that was that's what I'm thinking.
No, that's perfect. And like you mentioned, the gut issues, like you're aware that can occur. I'm sure it's probably happened to you at some point, right?
Yeah.
Carbohydrates oxidizing, they require that fermentation process in the gut. So, that bloating and whatnot is a natural occurrence. So it is a fine, delicate balance, I guess, right, between optimizing the intake to maximize the performance, but then at the same time, you don't want to you don't want to debilitate yourself and all of a sudden you can't run because your stomach can't really, it doesn't feel very good, right? It's like you're in pain ultimately. So it's a balance, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think every triathlete that has tried to push the intake has tried to get the stomach problems that you are mentioning, and yeah, then there's what you have to do is just practice more, or like completely change what you are doing.
This is fantastic, guys. Peter, from the we're getting close to the hour here, but from the are we pretty close to I guess closing the lid on the case study and everything we want to say there? I think we've covered everything that we've learned. And what's next? I guess for you both.
Yeah, well, I hope we can build on the knowledge actually, yeah, we have some ideas and a famous list. we're probably not gonna tell too much in a podcast like this. I mean, but yeah, we are not. I mean, my feeling is that we are not finished in evolving, but still there are a lot of factors here, and I mean Magnus has to stay fit and healthy and motivated to do these kind of things. But I hope personally that we can still add to the I would say pretty strong evidence-based knowledge we have, so I hope that if we meet in some months time that we could do a new talk and elaborate a bit. That was a long time saying nothing. Apologies for that to the listeners.
Good sidestep, Peter. That's fantastic. And what about you, Magnus? What's the what do you've got? What are you training for right now in the Canary Islands?
Yeah, so I had a little bit longer off season than I have had previously. It was a very long season last year in 24, so now we are trying to get back into a solid training rhythm. So not many experiments with Peter at the moment because the shape is not as it should be when you have to be in kind of somewhat the race shape to be able to get a lot out of it. So yeah, just trying to get back in a strong training routine and then building for the season where I have made the decision to make the Ironman World Championships my primary goal, meaning that I'm not racing anything else than the Ironman. I'm doing the Ironman Pro Series, so no T100 or no Roth for me. It has been a little bit tough decision to make because that is kind of that would have been the safe option, if you can say that, but I kind of decided to follow my heart and what is actually the biggest motivation for me, and then go all in on that. And that is at the moment winning the Ironman World Championships. So it's in Nice this year, and that really is different to Kona. Kona has the famous heat and that we have talked about, whereas Nice can be hot, but I think that is more, the challenge is more kind of the hilly bike course where you, especially on the equipment side of the bike, you can make a lot of choices and save a lot. A lot of considerations will go into that, but I'm sure Peter and I will find some physiology to to apply to the Nice course. I remember we did some testing in a pressure chamber last time before Nice, so maybe we have to revisit that again.
Fantastic. Well, guys, I just can't thank you both enough for coming on. Just a super insightful talk. We're going to include the link to all the papers and whatnot that we've spoken on. I love how you guys are both together pushing the envelope of what is possible through science. Magnus, your willingness to volunteer as a test subject, to publish your own data, to to encourage others to kind of, learn as well is quite remarkable and unique in this day and age. So yeah, just yeah, congratulations to you both, and I wish wish you both great success.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
and likewise, and thanks for the invitation. Yeah, and hopefully, yeah, we will progress, and all this, coming back to where you started. I think it's important. I mean, there's a lot of good things to say about science. There's also the way the whole business model works. I don't really like that, but that's a different part. But I think it's important that you give and take. I mean, I have benefited a lot from, say, your classic review paper with Chris Apis as an example. And it's not just about being a sucker. It's honestly, you read a lot of other people's work, and you also, I think, have to give something back for science to evolve. It's not the same. You can have a strict elite focus, and we also having a pretty clear idea of course, if we think we have an ace up in the sleeve, we are not gonna reveal that to the whole public. But I still think, it's a little bit of give and take, and I hope also that from this that that can encourage similar studies. But because I really think these case studies are of value. It's not to say that randomized controlled trials that are, let's say, maybe more general applicable to more less elite people, but I think we need both, and I hope we can see more of that, and spread the word. So I'm also happy you gave us the opportunity to talk a little bit about it. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Peter. Any final words, Magnus?
No, yeah, I agree with what Peter said, that one of the reasons I didn't talk about so far about the motivation is also to kind of encourage everyone to keep pushing, and that's what we are doing, and that's what if no one did it and we were the only one, it wouldn't be funny. So we are trying to show something so that others can hopefully seek inspiration and learn from it, and then one day do the same or progress from there. So yeah.
That's wonderful, and I have no doubt that is what will occur. So congrats to you both for taking that initiative. Thank you both on behalf of the total endurance science community. Yeah, congrats to you both. Thank you, and look forward to the next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.